Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm really glad you're here with me today. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been with us for a while, I want to say this very clearly. You are not alone in your English journey. If you've ever sat in a conversation and thought, I know these words, but I still don't understand what they're saying, then this episode is for you. If you've watched a movie, understood the first line, and then suddenly felt completely lost once the characters started speaking faster, this episode is for you too. Let's be honest. Understanding fast English is one of the hardest parts of learning this language. It can feel like native speakers are blending all the words together, skipping sounds, or just speaking in a completely different rhythm. You may read well. You may write well. You may even understand slow English without a problem. But when real conversations happen, when people speak at a natural speed, it suddenly feels like a storm of sound. And that's where many learners lose confidence. They start thinking, maybe I'm just not good at this. But the truth is, it's not about talent. It's about training. Your brain is not broken. It doesn't need to be replaced. It simply needs practice. And not the kind of practice that leaves you feeling more tired and confused, but the kind that actually helps your brain adjust to the natural flow of real English. That's what this episode is all about. I'm going to share techniques that are clear, simple, and most importantly, work. These are strategies you can use daily, even if you're busy, even if you feel stuck, even if you've tried before and felt like nothing changed. You're here, and that already tells me something important. You care about getting better. You're ready for change. And I'll be here with you through every minute of this journey. Now, I want to start by asking you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you understood English, but then felt completely lost the moment someone started speaking naturally? Maybe it was a conversation with a tourist, or a video you found online. Maybe it was an interview, a podcast, or a phone call. You heard the words, but they didn't land. They moved too quickly. The sentences disappeared before your brain had time to catch them. That's frustrating. It can make you feel like you're not making progress, like all the hours you've spent learning weren't enough. But what if I told you that this is normal? That your brain isn't failing? You just haven't learned how to train it yet? Here's the truth. Our brains are built to adapt. Think about it. How did you learn your first language? You didn't study grammar first. You didn't start with slow, clear speech. You were surrounded by real language, fast speech, messy pronunciation, unfinished thoughts, and your brain learned to make sense of it. That same brain is still with you today. It's ready to learn. It just needs the right kind of input, the right kind of exposure, and a little bit of guidance. That's what I'm here to give you. Today, I'm going to share listening strategies that focus not on understanding every word, but on catching the meaning. We're going to shift away from word-by-word translation and start focusing on patterns, sounds, rhythm, and context. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming fluent in the way real people speak, and you don't have to do it alone. This podcast is not just about information. It's about community. We're all here for the same reason: to grow, to improve, and to support each other in the process. And I want you to feel that support right now. Imagine thousands of people around the world listening to this same episode, feeling the same confusion, the same frustration, and the same hope that you're feeling. You're part of something bigger. You're not the only one who struggles with fast English. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're exactly where you need to be to start improving. Now, before we dive into the techniques, I want to ask for a small favor. If you're finding this helpful already, if you've been looking for a way to finally understand fast English, then take a moment to like this episode and subscribe to our channel. Why? Because when you do that, it helps more people find this kind of content. It tells the algorithm, this is useful, this helps people. And it also tells us that you're part of this movement, that you're serious about your English journey, and that you want to keep growing. That's how we build this community, together. Also, I want this to feel relaxed. You don't have to be perfect here. This is not a test. This is a space where we learn by trying, by noticing, by practicing. I know learning a language can feel formal, serious, even heavy sometimes, but let's keep it light today. Let's explore these techniques the same way you'd explore a new song or a new recipe, curious, open-minded, and, without pressure. You're not just a student here. You're a learner, a thinker, a person who's ready to experience English in a whole new way. So take a deep breath. Let go of the idea that you have to understand everything right away. You don't. That's not the goal. The goal is to understand more today than you did yesterday. The goal is to feel more connected, more confident, and more ready to handle real English out in the world. And I promise you, by the end of this episode, you'll have tools you can use immediately. No fancy grammar, no complicated rules. Just simple, powerful strategies that help your brain do what it was already made to do. Understand. Let's get started. When most people think about listening to fast English, the first reaction is usually panic. I've heard it so many times. Learners tell me they feel overwhelmed, like their brain can't keep up, like they're always a few seconds behind the conversation. I understand that feeling because I've worked with hundreds of students who've said the same thing. But here's the thing I always tell them, and I want you to hear this clearly. Your brain is much faster and smarter than you think. The problem isn't your brain. The problem is the type of practice you've been doing. If you've been spending your time trying to translate every single word while someone is speaking, you're already setting yourself up for frustration. That's not how real communication works. That's not even how native speakers listen. We don't listen word by word. We listen in groups, in sounds, in meaning. And your brain can learn to do the same. It's actually designed for this. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity. That's just a fancy word that means your brain can change and adapt with practice. It can build new connections, recognize new patterns, and respond more quickly to familiar sounds. But here's the key. It needs the right kind of input. It needs the kind of listening that helps it recognize the natural rhythm of English, not the kind that forces it to stop and analyze every detail. Let me tell you a story about someone who truly experienced this shift. His name is Thomas. He's a graphic designer from Leah, France. When he first reached out to our community, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "I've studied English for 10 years, but I still need subtitles to watch movies. I think my brain is too slow for English." Now, I hear this a lot. Learners think something is wrong with them, like they weren't born with the talent to understand fast speech. But Thomas wasn't slow. He was just using the wrong strategy. Like many learners, he thought he needed to understand everything at once, and he thought translation was the only way to do it. But that method had failed him over and over, so I asked him to try something completely different. I told him to stop translating. I told him to choose a short podcast episode, no more than 5 minutes, and just listen. Not study, not repeat every word. Just listen like a human listens. I asked him to do this every morning while drinking his coffee, without taking notes, without checking the transcript. Just listen and let his brain absorb the sound of real English. At first, he was uncomfortable. He felt like he was missing too much. But after a few days, something changed. He started to recognize phrases. He could catch expressions like, "You know what I mean," and "I'm not sure, but maybe," without trying. His brain was starting to tune into the rhythm of English. After 2 weeks, I asked him to listen to the same podcast again and write down what he understood. This time, he caught more than 80%. Not because he had studied the vocabulary, but because his brain had adapted. It had become more efficient, faster, more relaxed. That's what real listening practice does. It trains your brain to work with the language instead of fighting against it. This is not magic. It's not even a secret. It's something anyone can do. Your brain just needs 3 things: consistency, simplicity, and the right kind of input. When Thomas stopped trying to control every second of the listening experience and instead trusted his brain to do the work, that's when progress happened. He told me that for the first time, he watched an English movie with no subtitles and understood it. Not every word, of course, but enough to follow the story, enjoy the characters, and feel proud. That moment changed everything for him. And it can change everything for you too. I want you to think about this. When you listen to your native language, do you understand every single word? Probably not. Sometimes we miss things. We fill in the gaps. We guess based on the context. That's how natural communication works. English is no different. When people speak quickly, they often drop sounds. They connect words. They use informal expressions. And the good news is, your brain can learn to follow all of this, but not through pressure, not through perfection, through exposure. through listening that feels natural, relaxed, and regular. Thomas didn't have hours each day to study. He had a job. He had deadlines. He had responsibilities. But he committed to just 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes of focused listening with no expectations. And that routine did something powerful. It trained his brain to recognize English as a flowing language, not a collection of separate words. He didn't need to study grammar rules to understand. He needed to hear English the way it's really spoken. I want you to take a moment now and reflect. What's your current routine? Are you spending your time trying to translate? Are you stopping every 2 seconds to check a dictionary? If so, I understand. That's what most learners are taught to do. But maybe it's time to change the way you practice. Maybe it's time to give your brain a chance to show you how smart it really is. You don't need to understand everything perfectly today. You just need to listen, in a way that helps your brain grow stronger every day. Thomas thought he was too slow for English, but his brain was never the problem. His method was. Once he changed the way he listened, he discovered something that had always been true. His brain was built to learn languages. So is yours. Let it do the work. Let it surprise you. And remember, speed is not the enemy. It's simply a sign that you're getting closer to real, fluent, connected communication. One of the habits I see most often in English learners is translating. Word by word, sentence by sentence, thought by thought, they try to take what they hear in English and turn it into their native language as quickly as possible. It makes sense why this happens. Translation feels safe. It feels like control. If you translate, then maybe you won't get lost. Maybe you'll understand better. But the truth is, this habit is one of the biggest things holding you back. Translation is slow. It takes time, and time is exactly what you don't have when someone is speaking naturally. Native speakers don't pause between words to give you space. They talk in rhythms, they connect words, they move quickly. And if your brain is busy translating everything into your language, you're already behind. I want to help you shift your mindset. Instead of thinking, I need to translate to understand, I want you to start thinking, I need to notice. What do I mean by that? I mean paying attention to how English sounds, how words come together, how phrases repeat. It's not about stopping the audio and checking a dictionary every 5 seconds. It's about listening with curiosity, not control. Your goal is not to understand every word. Your goal is to get used to the way English flows, so your brain can start making connections automatically. Let me be clear. This is a new way of thinking for many people. It takes time to feel comfortable with it, and that's okay. You've probably spent years thinking that translation was the only way. But today, I want to invite you to let go of that habit and try something different. I want you to become a noticer. That means you listen not just for meaning, but for patterns. You start to hear things like how often people say, I don't know, or, you know what I mean. You begin to hear how words connect, how going to becomes gonna, how did you becomes did ya. You start to pick up on rhythms, common sentence structures, and tone. And over time, your brain starts to expect these patterns, which means it understands them faster. Let me give you an example. Think about the phrase, how are you doing? In a textbook, that phrase is clean and clear. But in real life, it often sounds like, how you doin', or even how ya doin'. If you're translating that word by word, you're lost. There's no how, no are, no you. At least not the way you learned them. But if you're listening for patterns, for sounds, for the melody of speech, then you start to recognize that group of sounds as one familiar phrase. That's noticing. That's real understanding. I want to share a very simple exercise with you. You don't need a teacher, a transcript, or a lot of time. All you need is a short audio clip, maybe from a podcast, a TV show, a YouTube video, or even a voice message. Choose something short, around 30 seconds to 1 minute. And here's what I want you to do. Just listen to it from beginning to end. No pausing, no stopping, no repeating, no analyzing. Just listen. Let the sounds pass through your ears. Let your brain experience the rhythm of the language. Then play it again. Still no pausing. Still no translating. Just notice what stands out. Maybe there's a phrase you recognize. Maybe there's a sound that repeats. Maybe there's a moment where you suddenly understand more than you did the first time. This is not passive listening. This is focused, relaxed, curious listening. You're training your brain to notice without pressure. And that's where the real growth happens. This kind of exposure builds what I like to call listening agility. It's like training your ears to be more flexible, more responsive. And over time, this skill becomes automatic. You stop translating, you start noticing, and your brain starts processing English much faster and more naturally. Let me tell you about someone who experienced this transformation. Her name is Sophia. She's from Madrid and she works as a nurse. Her schedule is full, early mornings, long shifts, and, very little time to sit down and study. But she was determined to improve her listening. She told me she used to pause every sentence in an English video, write down the words, translate them, and then replay the audio to check. It was exhausting, and after months of doing it, she still felt slow when she heard people speaking fast. So I gave her this exact exercise. I told her to pick a short video each day and just listen. No subtitles, no notebook. Just listen to the same 1-minute clip 5 times. At first, she said it felt like nothing was happening. She still didn't understand everything. But after a few days, she started to feel something different. Her brain was no longer stuck trying to translate. It was catching phrases. She began to notice the same expressions showing up in different clips. Suddenly, phrases like, "let me think," and "I guess so," sounded familiar. They stopped being noise. They started to have shape and meaning. 2 weeks later, Sophia told me something that made me smile. She said she was walking through the hospital, listening to a conversation between two patients in English. And for the first time, she understood what they were saying without thinking about it. No dictionary, no translation, just understanding. That's the power of noticing. So if you're listening to me right now and thinking, "I don't know if this will work for me," I want to say this. It will if you stay with it. This is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about giving your brain the chance to learn the way it was meant to learn, through exposure, repetition, and curiosity. You don't have to understand everything to grow. You just have to keep listening, keep noticing, and keep trusting the process. Stop chasing every word. Start observing how English moves. Listen to how people actually speak, not how the textbook says they should. Give your brain the freedom to experience the language without stopping it every 5 seconds. The more you do this, the stronger your listening skills will become, not because you memorized rules, but because you trained your brain to listen like a native listener. And that is a powerful change. When we think about understanding English, especially when it's spoken fast, most learners believe they need to catch every single word to truly understand what's being said. I used to hear it all the time. Students telling me that they couldn't follow a conversation because they missed 1 or 2 words. They would feel frustrated, like the entire sentence was lost just because of a small gap in understanding. But here's something important I want to tell you today. Understanding fast English is not about hearing every word. It's about getting the message. It's about following the flow of the idea, not collecting every single sound like a machine. Language is about communication. And real understanding happens when you focus on meaning, not on words. When you watch a movie or listen to a podcast in your own language, do you always catch every word? Probably not. Sometimes we zone out for a second. Sometimes we miss a word because someone coughs or we're distracted. But we don't stop the conversation. We don't panic. We just keep listening, and our brain fills in the gaps. That's exactly how you should approach fast English. You don't need to grab every word. You need to catch the idea. When you shift your focus from trying to hear everything to trying to understand the point, something amazing happens. Your anxiety drops, your confidence grows, and you actually understand more. Let me tell you the story of Alvara. She's a university student from Warsaw, studying psychology. She's smart, hardworking, and very committed to learning English because she dreams of doing a research internship abroad. But for a long time, listening was her biggest fear. She told me she avoided speaking to native English speakers because she couldn't understand them unless they slowed down or repeated everything. It wasn't a vocabulary problem. She had studied English for years. It wasn't grammar either. The problem was that she was trying to hear and understand every single word. And if she missed even one, she'd freeze. She'd lose the rest of the sentence because her brain was stuck thinking about what she didn't catch. One day, she sent me a message saying, "I'm starting to think I'll never be able to follow real conversations. I can read just fine, I do well in writing, but listening makes me feel like I know nothing." I could feel her frustration, and I knew she wasn't alone. So I gave her one piece of advice. I told her, "From now on, I want you to stop trying to hear every word. I want you to focus only on the message. Listen like a detective. Even if you miss a word, try to guess the meaning from what comes next." At first, she didn't like the idea. She felt like it was giving up. But I reminded her that native speakers also miss words sometimes. We don't listen for individual words. We listen for the message. And that's what I wanted her to learn to do. She started with short clips, movie scenes, interviews, podcast episodes. The first time she tried it, she still felt nervous. She said it felt like walking in the dark. But I asked her to write down the main idea of what she heard after each listening session. Not the exact words, just the idea. After a week, she began to notice something. Even when she didn't understand every word, she could still follow what people were talking about. The tone, the situation, the repeated phrases, they all helped her brain connect the dots. And slowly, the pressure to be perfect disappeared. Alvara told me that she listened to a TED Talk without subtitles for the first time. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the topic, the speaker's opinion, and even some of the jokes. She said she smiled during the video, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged in the English-speaking world. Not because she was perfect, but because she could finally follow the message. That was the moment she realized something important. Listening is not about collecting sounds, it's about connection. And meaning is the bridge that connects people. I want you to try what Alvara did. Choose a short clip, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and listen to it without worrying about the details. Ask yourself, what are they talking about? What's the general idea? What's the feeling behind the words? Don't pause. Don't rewind. Just listen and let your brain do the work. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. Your mind will want to go back, to fix every gap. But fight that urge. Let go of the need to understand everything and focus only on what you do understand. With practice, that small piece grows bigger. You can also try this with conversations. If you're speaking with someone and they say something you don't fully catch, don't panic. Listen to what comes next. Many times, the next sentence will give you the context. If they say, "I had a crazy day at work," and you didn't catch the word crazy, you'll still understand it when they add, "My boss changed the schedule 3 times." Your brain is great at connecting ideas. Trust it. When you start listening this way, something beautiful happens. You become more relaxed. You stop worrying about being perfect. You stop judging yourself every time you miss a word. You start to enjoy the process more. And without even noticing it, you begin to understand more. You start recognizing expressions, understanding jokes, feeling the rhythm of the language. Your listening becomes less about survival and more about curiosity. Alvara's story is a reminder that progress in English is not always about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less. Less translating, less analyzing, less chasing perfection. It's about shifting your focus to the things that actually help your brain learn. When you focus on meaning, you allow your brain to relax and absorb the language the way it was meant to. You start to trust the process. You realize that missing a word is not the end of the world. It's just part of the journey. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been trying too hard to hear everything and it's only making you feel more anxious, I want you to try this new way. Let the words flow. Let the message guide you. Let go of control and focus on connection. Because in the end, the goal of learning English isn't to catch every word. It's to understand people, ideas, emotions, and stories. And that starts with meaning. One of the biggest shifts you can make in your English listening practice is to stop hearing individual words and start hearing groups of words together. This is called chunking, and it's one of the most powerful tools you can use to understand fast English. When native speakers talk, they don't speak word by word. They speak in chunks, phrases that go together naturally, expressions that carry a full idea. These chunks are like the rhythm of the language. If you try to break them apart, you lose the music, the flow, and the meaning. But once you start hearing them as whole units, your listening becomes faster, smoother, and much more natural. I know it's tempting to try and understand every single word, especially when you're learning. But the truth is, that method slows you down. If you listen word by word, your brain is always trying to catch up. It's working too hard and it misses the bigger picture. But when you start listening in chunks, everything changes. Suddenly you recognize that at the end of the day is not 5 separate words. It's one idea. You hear, you know what I mean, and your brain understands it as a single unit, not 6 different words to process one by one. I remember talking to a student named Marco from Zagreb. He told me he could read English well and even write pretty confidently, but listening was his biggest struggle. He said, "It's like I hear a wave of sounds, but I can't break it into parts." When we looked closer at his listening habits, we discovered something important. He was trying to separate and translate every word. He thought that's what fluent listeners do. But native speakers don't listen like that. They don't hear do plus you plus want plus to plus go plus out. They hear do you want to go out as one flowing sound. That's chunking. So I gave Marco a challenge. I told him to pick 10 common phrases in English and listen for them during the week. He didn't need to study the grammar or analyze the sentence structure. His job was just to recognize the chunks as he heard them. Phrases like, let me think, I'm not sure, kind of like, all of a sudden, what do you mean, and I guess so. These are phrases people say all the time, and once your brain learns to catch them, listening becomes so much easier. Because your brain isn't starting from zero every time. It already knows the shape, the pattern, the meaning. I want you to try this too. Think about the last time you listened to someone speak English. Did you hear phrases, or were you focusing on every individual word? Try to remember a moment when someone said something like, at the same time, or as far as I know. Did you hear those as connected sounds, or as separate pieces? The more you expose yourself to these common chunks, the more automatic they become. Your brain doesn't need to translate anymore. It just recognizes the group and understands the message. Let's take the phrase, you. Know what I mean? This is a chunk that appears in conversations constantly. It doesn't mean you have to analyze each word. Most of the time, the speaker is not even asking for confirmation. It's just a way to keep the conversation flowing. If you listen to this phrase word by word, it sounds long and complicated. But once you hear it enough times, your brain starts to treat it like one unit. It becomes as simple and familiar as your name. That's what happens with all chunks when you listen to them enough. Another example is at the end of the day. You hear this in meetings, interviews, discussions. It's used to introduce a final point or conclusion. If you try to pick it apart every time, you slow down your understanding. But if you train your ear to catch the full chunk, it gives you a shortcut. You know what's coming next. You know the speaker is about to summarize or make a final comment. That kind of awareness builds your confidence because it helps you follow the structure of real conversations. Now I want to share a simple activity you can start using today. Choose a short audio clip, maybe from a podcast, a YouTube interview, or a series episode, and listen to it 2 or 3 times. Your goal is not to understand every word. Your goal is to catch the chunks. Try to notice how people group words together. Write down any phrases that repeat, especially the ones you hear often in daily speech. You can even pause the audio and say the chunks out loud, repeating the rhythm and the pronunciation. The more you do this, the more familiar those chunks become. And when they come up in a real conversation, your brain will recognize them immediately. That's how you train your listening. Not by collecting single words, but by collecting meaningful phrases. Chunks give you speed, fluency, and understanding. They help you predict what's coming. They give your brain patterns to follow, and they reduce the pressure to be perfect. Because when you hear a chunk and understand it, you don't need to decode every sound. You just know what it means. Marco told me that after 2 weeks of practicing with chunks, he started understanding conversations more easily. He said it felt like his ears were getting faster, even though the speakers hadn't changed their speed. That's because his brain was no longer stopping at every word. It was listening in units. He felt more relaxed, more confident, and more connected to the language. So when you listen to English, remember this. Focus on the phrases. Look for the pieces that stay together, the groups of words that carry one idea. Train your brain to recognize them. Practice saying them out loud. Repeat them until they feel natural. Because fluent listening is not about speed, it's about pattern recognition. And once you start noticing the chunks, everything else starts falling into place. One of the most underrated tools in language learning is repetition. It's not flashy, it doesn't feel exciting at first, and it might even seem boring. But it works. Repetition is the quiet secret behind real progress, especially when it comes to listening. If you've ever felt like you're listening and forgetting everything the moment it ends, or like the words just slip through your ears and disappear, then repetition might be exactly what you need. It's not about listening more, it's about listening smarter, giving your brain a second, third, or even fifth chance to understand, connect, and remember. The more your brain hears something, the easier it becomes to recognize and process it the next time. That's how fluency is built, not in one big moment of understanding, but in small repeated exposures that create deep familiarity. Let me tell you the story of Lars. He's a marketing intern from Stockholm, and like many learners, he was stuck in what I call the listen and forget cycle. He told me he listened to English podcasts during his commute every day, but nothing seemed to stick. He'd hear expressions and phrases that sounded useful, but a few minutes later he couldn't remember any of them. Worse, he still struggled to understand native speakers when they talked at a natural speed. He was doing what he thought he was supposed to, listening as much as possible, but he wasn't seeing the results he expected. So I asked him one question. Are you repeating anything you listen to? His answer was no. I explained that listening to something once is like meeting a stranger on the street. You might recognize the face, but you don't really know them. Listening to the same thing several times, though, that's how you build a relationship with the language. That's how you move from recognition to understanding, and then to real confidence. I gave him a simple challenge. Choose one short podcast episode, no more than 5 minutes, and listen to it every day for a week. Not 5 different podcasts, not 5 different topics, just one, the same one, every day. The goal wasn't to understand everything on day 1. The goal was to notice how much more he could understand each day. He picked a podcast where 2 people were discussing simple life habits, nothing too complex. On the first day, he said he only understood about 30%. The voices were fast, some expressions were unfamiliar, and he had to resist the urge to stop and translate. But I reminded him, just keep listening, don't analyze, don't pause, just let it play. Day 2 came, and he felt slightly better. He recognized some of the phrases from the day before. By day 3, he was starting to anticipate what the speakers were going to say next. He could hear how certain chunks repeated, how expressions came back again and again. And by the 5th day, something amazing happened. He understood almost everything. Not because the podcast had changed, but because his brain had. It had adjusted. It had tuned in. It had gotten used to the rhythm, the vocabulary, the voices. And the best part? He didn't feel tired. He didn't feel frustrated. He felt empowered. Lars told me it was the first time he felt like a real English listener. Not a student, not someone trying to survive the language, but someone who could actually follow and enjoy it. He began to realize that repetition wasn't boring. It was powerful. Each time he listened, his brain caught something new. A word he didn't hear before. A sentence that finally made sense. An expression that felt familiar. And that repetition turned confusion into clarity. Repetition is not just about understanding. It's about building confidence. When you repeat something and see progress, you prove to yourself that you're improving. You give yourself visible results. That's what builds belief. And belief is everything in language learning. If you believe you can understand, you'll keep going. If you believe progress is possible, you'll keep trying. Repetition gives you evidence of your growth. It shows you that your brain is learning, even when it doesn't feel like it. I want you to try what Lars did. Pick one piece of audio that interests you. It could be a podcast episode, a short YouTube video, or even a voice message from a friend. Choose something that feels manageable, no more than 5 minutes long, and listen to it every day for 5 days. You don't need to take notes. You don't need to understand everything on the first day. Just listen. Let your brain do the work. Pay attention to what you recognize more easily with each listen. Notice the words that become clearer, the phrases that sound more natural, the moments that used to feel fast and now feel familiar. Repetition also helps you with pronunciation and rhythm. When you hear the same voice again and again, you start to internalize the patterns. You begin to notice where the speaker slows down, where they emphasize certain words, where their voice rises or falls. These are the invisible parts of language, the things that don't appear in a textbook but make all the difference in real communication. Repetition trains your ear to hear those things, and once you can hear them, you can use them too. Lars eventually expanded his practice. After mastering one podcast, he moved on to a new one, then another. But he kept the habit of repetition. He told me that now, whenever he finds an episode he likes, he listens to it multiple times before moving on. It doesn't take extra time. In fact, it saves him time, because he understands more and remembers more with less effort. And more than that, it gives him confidence. Every time he finishes a familiar episode and realizes how much more he understood than the day before, he feels stronger, more capable, more fluent. I want you to know that repetition is not a step back. It's a strategy for moving forward. It's not lazy. It's not a waste of time. It's one of the smartest things you can do to help your brain adapt to fast English. So don't be afraid to repeat. Don't be afraid to revisit the same content. Your brain loves familiarity. It learns best through exposure and repetition. And every time you listen again, you're teaching your brain to listen faster, deeper, and with more confidence. That's how real listening skills are built, one repetition at a time. So many English learners come to me with the same story. They say, I try to listen, but I give up quickly. I feel like I understand nothing, so I stop. And I get it. Listening can feel frustrating. When someone speaks fast and you catch just a few words, it's easy to feel like all your effort isn't working. But what if I told you that one of the best ways to train your brain to understand fast English doesn't involve studying, repeating phrases, or even sitting down to focus? What if part of the solution is simply having English around you, without pressure, without expectations, just as a natural part of your environment? There's something incredibly powerful about low-pressure listening. It doesn't feel like studying. It doesn't ask you to perform. It's not a test. It's simply letting your brain absorb the rhythm, tone, and flow of English the same way children do when they grow up hearing their native language. When a child hears their language every day, they're not trying to memorize anything. They're not thinking, what verb tense is that? Or, did I understand the exact meaning of that sentence? They're just living. And over time, their brain connects the sounds, the meanings, and the structures naturally. That same kind of exposure works for adults too, if we remove the pressure. I want you to think about your daily life for a second. Where do you have quiet moments? Maybe when you're walking to work, cooking dinner, driving, or doing laundry. These moments are perfect opportunities for background listening. Not listening with a notebook in your hand or your finger on the pause button, but listening like you'd listen to music. Just letting it play. Letting the sounds wash over you, without the expectation of understanding everything. This type of listening helps your brain stay connected to English without stress. I remember working with a woman named Hajin from Seoul. She was a busy architecture student, always juggling projects and presentations. She told me she didn't have time to sit down and study English listening skills. And whenever she did try, she ended up frustrated because she didn't understand everything. So I asked her a simple question. What if you could practice without pressure? She looked confused. I said, what if you just played an English podcast while you walked to campus? No stopping, no repeating, no checking the words. Just let it play in the background like music. She agreed to try it for 1 week. Every morning on her way to class, she played a short podcast episode. At first, she said it felt like noise, just fast sounds she couldn't really follow. But she kept going. By the 3rd day, she noticed something. She started recognizing a few words here and there. On the 5th day, she found herself laughing at a joke the host made. She was surprised. I didn't understand everything, she told me, but somehow I got the feeling. I understood enough to follow. That's the magic of background listening. It removes pressure and allows your brain to relax and absorb without fear. When we feel stressed while listening, our brain goes into survival mode. It focuses on what we don't understand instead of what we do. But when there's no pressure to perform, our brain becomes more open, more flexible, and more capable of picking up sounds, patterns, and ideas. You don't need to understand every word. You just need to be present with the language. Over time, the repeated exposure builds familiarity. And the more familiar English becomes, the easier it is to process in real situations. I want you to think about where you could include low-pressure listening in your life. Could you play a podcast while you get ready in the morning? Could you turn on an English audiobook while you cook or clean? Could you listen to casual interviews on YouTube while walking your dog? It doesn't have to be a big commitment. Even 10 minutes a day can make a difference. The key is to treat it like a gentle habit, not a demanding task. The truth is, learning a language is not just about effort, it's about exposure. And sometimes, the best kind of exposure is the one that feels the most natural. You don't need to analyze every sentence. You don't need to push yourself to the limit every time. You just need to stay in contact with the language consistently and calmly. That quiet consistency is what builds real results. When Hajin continued her low-pressure listening routine, she told me something beautiful. I no longer feel like English is this distant, difficult thing. Now it's just a part of my day. That's what I want for you too. I want English to become something that feels familiar, something that fits into your life in a gentle, supportive way. Not something you're afraid of, not something you feel like you're failing at, but something you live with, something you hear and slowly grow into. Let go of the need to catch every word. Let go of the pressure to understand it all. Give your brain permission to enjoy the sounds, the flow, the melody of English. You might be surprised how much you understand without even trying. You might find that your confidence grows not when you push harder, but when you relax and stay consistent. Listening without pressure allows your brain to grow in peace, and that growth is real, even if it's quiet at first. So today, I encourage you to create space for low-pressure listening. Find those small moments in your routine where English can simply be present. You don't need to sit down or stop everything you're doing. Just press play and let it be there. Whether it's in the kitchen, on a walk, or during your commute, you're giving your brain the chance to practice in the most natural way possible. And the more often you do it, the more your brain learns, without fear, without tension, and without pressure. There's a strange but powerful truth when it comes to learning to understand fast English. Sometimes, the best way to get faster is to slow down. I know that sounds like a contradiction. After all, if your goal is to understand native speakers who talk quickly, wouldn't it make more sense to push yourself to keep up with their speed? That's what most people think. But here's what I've learned from working with hundreds of learners around the world. When you slow things down first, you give your brain the space it needs to process, to notice, and to build the skills that actually lead to fast understanding later. Think of it like learning to dance. If you watch a professional dancer move quickly, it looks effortless, fluid, natural. But behind that performance is hours and hours of slow, careful practice. They don't start fast, they start slow, step by step, learning the rhythm, feeling the movements in their body. Only after mastering it slowly can they speed up and still stay in control. Language learning is the same. Fast English is full of connected sounds, contractions, and dropped syllables. If you jump into fast speech without preparation, it just sounds like noise. But if you slow it down, suddenly, you begin to hear things you never noticed before. I want to show you how this works. Let's say you take a short video clip, maybe a native speaker, talking for 30 seconds. Play it at normal speed and try to follow. Maybe you catch a few words. Maybe you feel a little lost. That's okay. Now slow it down, just a little. Most apps or websites like YouTube let you reduce the speed to 0.75 or even 0.5. At that slower pace, pay close attention. Do you hear how the words connect? Phrases like, "Did you eat yet?" start to sound like, "Did ya eat yet?" You start to recognize that what seemed like one long sound is actually 3 familiar words. You notice how intonation works, where the speaker pauses, how certain words are emphasized. This level of detail is often invisible at full speed. I worked with a student named Matteo, a law student from Milan. He was doing everything right, listening to English podcasts, watching movies without subtitles. but he still felt lost when people spoke fast. He told me, "I understand nothing when I watch interviews. It's too quick." So I asked him to slow things down. We took a short podcast excerpt and played it at half speed. The first time, he was amazed. He heard full sentences for the first time. He noticed how phrases like, "I don't know," turned into, "I don't know." Words were no longer flying past him. They had shape, they had texture, and most importantly, they had meaning. Over time, we built a routine together. First, he would listen to a short clip at 0.5 speed, then 0.75, then normal speed. He repeated the same clip each day. By day 3, he understood it perfectly at full speed, not because he memorized it, but because his brain had trained to hear the sounds more efficiently. The gradual increase in speed helped him build a bridge from slow clarity to fast comprehension. And this method didn't just help him with that one clip, it improved his overall listening. Suddenly, movie dialogue and real-life conversations didn't feel so impossible. He had trained his brain to keep up. You can do the same thing. Find a video or audio clip you enjoy, something short, interesting, and real. It could be a comedy sketch, a YouTube interview, a podcast segment, or even a scene from a series you love. Play it at a slower speed. Don't worry about understanding every word. Just focus on hearing the full phrases. What words are blending together? What sounds are getting dropped? What expressions repeat? Notice how the rhythm changes. Listen once, twice, maybe even 3 times at the slow speed. Then slowly increase the pace. By the time you're back at normal speed, your brain will already be familiar with the sounds. It won't be starting from zero. This technique doesn't take a lot of time. Even 5 minutes a day can help. And you don't need special tools, just access to a video platform with speed control and something to listen to that makes you curious. The key is to listen actively, not passively. Slowing down gives you the chance to focus, to notice, to really hear what's happening in the language. And when you practice like this, you're not just learning individual words. You're training your brain to handle the real pace of English conversation. There's something deeply encouraging about this method. It reminds us that we don't have to feel overwhelmed by fast English forever. Speed is not something you chase. It's something you grow into, step by step. When you take the time to slow down, you're building a foundation that supports fast understanding later. You're helping your ears and your brain work together. And with each practice session, the language becomes less of a mystery and more of something you can handle. I love hearing from learners who try this and suddenly feel a shift. They say, "I used to think native speakers were just too fast for me, but now I realize they're not fast. They're just connected." That's a big moment. Because once you see that speed is made up of familiar chunks and sounds, it stops feeling impossible. It becomes something you can train for. And that training doesn't start with pressure. It starts with slowing down. So the next time you feel discouraged by how fast English sounds, try this. Pause, slow the clip, and really listen. Don't push yourself to understand everything right away. Let your brain experience the sound. Let it absorb the rhythm. And then, gradually, bring the speed back up. You'll be surprised how much your brain can adjust. Fast understanding comes from slow, mindful practice. And the more you slow down at the beginning, the faster your progress will feel in the long run. One of the most effective ways to improve your listening skills and your pronunciation at the same time is a technique called shadowing. It's simple in theory, but incredibly powerful in practice. You listen to a native speaker, and you repeat what they say out loud immediately, almost like you're their echo. You don't stop the audio, you don't take notes, you don't try to understand every word before you speak. You just follow the sound. You shadow the voice, the rhythm, the melody, the stress. It's not about being perfect. It's about connection. The goal is not to imitate every single sound with precision. The goal is to train your brain and your mouth to work together in real time, so English begins to feel more natural and less like a foreign language. This method works because it forces you to listen actively. You can't zone out. You can't just let the words pass through your ears. When you shadow, you have to focus fully. You're hearing, processing, and producing language all at once. And that's exactly what makes it so effective. Shadowing builds your listening speed. your pronunciation awareness, and your speaking rhythm all at the same time. You start noticing things you never noticed before: how the speaker connects words, where they pause, what syllables they emphasize, how their voice rises and falls. Let me tell you about Matteo. He's from Milan, and he works as a legal assistant in a fast-paced office. His English was already pretty strong when we met. He could write formal emails and understand technical vocabulary, but he struggled with natural conversation. When native speakers talked casually, especially in interviews or meetings, he found himself getting lost. He said, "They speak so fast, and everything blends together. I can't tell where one word ends and the next begins." He also felt that his own speech sounded robotic and flat, not confident or fluent. He wanted to sound more natural, but didn't know how to get there. That's when I introduced him to shadowing. At first, he thought it would be uncomfortable to speak out loud while listening to someone else, especially during his busy commute. But he decided to give it a try. He picked short interviews from a podcast he liked. Nothing too formal, just real people talking in everyday English. He played the audio through his headphones on the subway and quietly repeated what the speaker said in real time. No pausing, no perfect pronunciation, just following the flow. On the first day, he messaged me saying, "It's hard. My brain is trying to keep up, and I feel like I'm always behind." That's normal at the beginning. Shadowing feels awkward at first because it's different from how we usually practice language. But I encouraged him to stick with it, to focus less on getting the words right and more on matching the rhythm. I told him, "You're not copying sounds. You're syncing with English like it's music." By the end of the first week, something had shifted. Matteo said he was starting to hear the structure of sentences more clearly. He was recognizing phrases like, "I mean," "you know," and "I guess so," not as separate words, but as one sound unit. His mouth began to follow the patterns more naturally. And the most exciting part, when he had a conversation with a colleague in English, he found himself using some of the same expressions he had shadowed during the week. He wasn't planning to. It just came out. That's when he realized the method was working. Shadowing works best when you choose audio that matches your level and interests. If the clip is too fast or too complex, you'll feel frustrated. But if it's something engaging, an interview, a vlog, a speech, it becomes easier to stay focused. Start small. Maybe a 1-minute clip. Play it and repeat along. Don't worry if you miss words. Keep going. Try again tomorrow with the same clip. As you practice, your brain begins to recognize more. Your tongue moves faster, your timing improves, and your confidence grows. There's something about speaking at the same time as a native speaker that rewires the way you hear English. You stop hearing words in isolation. You begin to hear the rhythm of the language, the pauses, the flow, the melody. And the more you feel that rhythm, the easier it is to keep up in real conversations. Your listening becomes less about catching every word and more about following the beat. I've had many learners tell me that shadowing helped them feel brave enough to speak English out loud. Because when you do it every day, even quietly on your own, you start to feel how the language moves. You're no longer stuck translating in your head. You're participating. Even if it's just with your headphones and a podcast, that daily repetition builds familiarity. It removes the fear of sounding strange. It makes English feel like something you can own. Matteo kept shadowing for several months. It became his daily habit during his commute. He said it turned his train ride into a private language gym. And over time, his listening improved dramatically. He no longer panicked when someone spoke quickly. His pronunciation got smoother, more confident. Even his colleagues noticed. One of them said, "You sound more natural lately. What changed?" And Matteo just smiled. So if you're listening to English and feeling stuck, try this. Find a short clip you enjoy, press play, and start shadowing. You don't need to be perfect. You don't even need to understand every word. Just repeat. Match the rhythm. Let your voice follow theirs. You'll be surprised how quickly your brain adapts. This technique doesn't just help you understand English, it helps you feel it. And when you feel it, you begin to live it. That's when everything starts to change. Subtitles can be both a great help and a tricky challenge when you're working on your English listening skills. I often hear learners say, "Should I watch with subtitles or without?" And the honest answer is, It depends on how you use them. Subtitles are not just words on the screen. They can be tools that help your brain connect sounds to meaning, or they can become a crutch that stops you from really listening. The key is to use subtitles strategically, not all the time, but in a way that supports your learning and pushes your brain to grow. Let me start by explaining why subtitles can sometimes hurt your listening practice. When you watch a video with subtitles on from the very beginning, it's easy to rely on reading instead of listening. Your eyes quickly jump to the words on the screen, and your ears don't have to work as hard. This might feel comforting because you understand the story or the message, but it's actually slowing down the development of your listening brain. Your brain gets used to seeing words instead of hearing sounds, which makes real-life conversations much harder. Because in real life, you don't have subtitles, but subtitles can also be incredibly helpful if used carefully and in the right order. That's why I recommend a 3-step approach that gives your brain a chance to listen, check, and then listen again. Here's how it works. First, you watch or listen to something without subtitles at all. This is your brain's first chance to focus purely on sounds, rhythm, and intonation. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. This step is about training your ears, not about perfect comprehension. Just try to get the general meaning, the feeling, the flow. Then, after you've done that, you watch the same video or listen to the same audio again, but this time with subtitles turned on. This second pass helps your brain connect the sounds it heard before with the exact words and phrases on the screen. It's like you're checking your understanding, but in a supportive way. When you see the words, you might realize, "Oh, that's what they said," or "I missed that expression." This step builds awareness of what you're missing when you only listen. Finally, the third step is to listen or watch the same clip once more without subtitles. This time, because you already know the content and the words, your brain is better prepared to catch more details. You'll notice you understand more than the first time. This repeated exposure helps your brain adjust naturally to the sounds and patterns of English, making your listening stronger and faster. I want to share a story about Anna, a software engineer from Berlin. She had been learning English for years but struggled with understanding movies and TV shows. She always used subtitles because she felt lost without them. When I suggested this 3-step method, she was skeptical at first. She tried it with a short TED Talk she liked. On the first listen without subtitles, she caught only bits and pieces and felt frustrated. But on the second watch, with subtitles on, she suddenly connected everything. She saw the words she missed before and understood the message more clearly. By the third time, without subtitles, she was amazed at how much she could follow. That experience gave her confidence to try longer and more challenging videos. Over time, she found herself relying less and less on subtitles. The beauty of this method is that it helps your brain build listening skills step by step without overwhelming you. It's like lifting weights for your ears and your mind. The first step is endurance, listening without help. The second is correction, checking what you missed. The third is strength, listening. Again, stronger than before. This approach is much more effective than always watching with subtitles or always avoiding them. It balances challenge and support. I also want to remind you that subtitles don't always have to be in English. Sometimes, if you're very new to English, watching with subtitles in your native language can give you a general idea of what's being said. But as soon as you're comfortable, switching to English subtitles and following the 3-step method I described will give you better results. The goal is to train your brain to hear English sounds, not just read words. If you want to try this right now, pick a short video or podcast episode you enjoy. It could be a favorite YouTuber, a scene from a TV show, or a short speech. First, listen or watch without subtitles. Take notes mentally if you want, but don't pause or rewind too much. Then watch or listen again with English subtitles. Pay attention to the parts you didn't catch. Finally, listen one more time without subtitles and notice how much more you understand. Using subtitles strategically like this helps your brain get used to the natural speed and flow of English. It trains your ears to connect the sounds you hear with the words you know. Over time, your listening confidence will grow. You'll find that real conversations feel less like puzzles and more like natural exchanges, and you won't need subtitles to keep up anymore. Remember, subtitles are a tool, not a solution. When you use them with intention and in the right order, they can make a big difference in your listening journey. But if you rely on them too much or watch everything with subtitles from the start, your brain misses out on the opportunity to develop its listening muscles. So be mindful. Try the 3-step method. Give your ears the challenge they need and the support they deserve. I'm excited for you to try this. The more you practice listening with and without subtitles in this way, the faster your brain will adjust to fast English. You'll notice that you don't just hear words, you understand meaning. And that's the real goal. Listening is not about catching every single word. It's about catching the message. Using subtitles strategically will help you do just that. One of the most exciting and often overlooked strategies to improve your English listening skills is the power of predicting. When you listen to fast English, it's not just about hearing every word clearly, it's about training your brain to anticipate what comes next. Predicting what someone might say before they actually say it sharpens your listening in a way that passive hearing never can. It makes the process active, engaging, and even a little fun. When your brain is busy guessing and expecting, it becomes quicker and more alert. This means you start catching words and phrases faster because your mind is already prepared for them. Let me share a story about Leah, a young professional from Berlin. Leah was someone who loved watching English videos and TV shows, but she often felt frustrated when the speakers talked quickly or used expressions she didn't know. She told me, "I want to understand better, but sometimes the speed is too much. I feel like I'm always behind." To help her, I introduced the idea of making predictions while listening or watching. It's like turning listening into a game where you get to guess what's coming next. Leah started with simple steps. She would watch short videos and pause right before a new sentence. Then she would try to guess what the speaker might say next. At first, her guesses were pretty general. Things like, maybe they will say how they feel, or I think the next sentence will be about work. But even that made a difference. She was focusing her brain on the content actively instead of passively waiting for words to come. This shift in mindset is so important because predicting forces you to pay close attention to the context, the tone, and the words already said. As Leah practiced more, she became bolder with her guesses. She started noticing common phrases and sentence structures. For example, if the speaker said, "I had a really busy day," she might predict the next sentence would explain why or what happened after. Maybe they will say, "I had back-to-back meetings," or "I didn't have time to eat lunch." Sometimes she was right, and sometimes she was pleasantly surprised when the speaker said something different. But the key was that her brain was working actively. One day, Leah shared a moment of excitement with me. She was watching an interview, paused the video, guessed the next sentence correctly, and then felt a rush of confidence when she heard it exactly as she predicted. That small success was huge for her. It showed her that she was improving, that her brain was tuning into the language in a new way. That feeling of being in the game made listening less scary and more motivating. The beauty of using prediction in your listening practice is that it's flexible and easy to do anywhere. You don't need special equipment or a teacher with you. You can pause and guess during any video or audio you choose. You can even play this game in real conversations by anticipating what your conversation partner might say next. It makes listening feel more like a dynamic interaction rather than a passive task. Predicting also connects with how native speakers actually understand each other. When people talk quickly, they don't wait to hear every word perfectly. Their brains are already filling in gaps, guessing the meaning based on context and prior knowledge. When you practice prediction, you're training your brain to work in this natural, real-world way. You're shifting from being a passive listener to an active participant in the conversation. Another benefit is that prediction helps with vocabulary. When you guess what might come next, you're also recalling words and expressions you know or are learning. This mental workout makes it easier to recognize these words when you hear them at full speed later on. It's like training your memory and your ears at the same time. If you want to try this right now, start with a short video or audio clip. Play it until you reach a natural pause or sentence break, then pause the clip. Ask yourself, what do I think they will say next? Make a guess, then play to see if you were right. Don't worry if you're wrong. Every guess is a chance to train your brain. The more you do this, the more your listening becomes active and engaging. Leah's experience shows that even a small game like predicting sentences can build big listening confidence. When you predict well, your brain relaxes because it feels prepared. You're not just reacting to fast speech, you're staying one step ahead. This makes understanding fast English less intimidating and more enjoyable. So next time you listen to English, try playing this prediction game. Pause and guess the next sentence. Pay attention to the clues, the words, the tone, the topic. Make your brain work with the language, not just listen to it. It's a simple but powerful way to make your listening skills sharper and your confidence higher. And that's exactly what you need to train your brain to understand fast English more naturally. One of the most important things I want to share with you today is this. Listen to voices you enjoy. This might sound simple, but it is absolutely essential when it comes to training your brain to understand fast English. Connection matters. If you're listening to something that feels boring or hard to relate to, your brain quickly tunes out. No matter how many tips or techniques you learn, if you don't enjoy what you listen to, it will be much harder to stay motivated and consistent. And as we know, consistency is key to improving any language skill, especially listening. I want you to think about the last time you listened to a podcast, a video, or a show in English that really caught your attention. Maybe it was a story that made you laugh, an interview with someone you admire, or a topic you find fascinating. When that happens, you don't have to force yourself to pay attention, right? Your brain naturally stays alert and curious. That's the kind of listening experience you want to create for yourself regularly. Because when you feel joy and interest, learning doesn't feel like work. It feels like a pleasure. Let me share a story about Rachel, who lives in London and works in finance. She struggled for a long time with listening comprehension. She tried all kinds of materials, news reports, academic lectures, and even classic movies. But she found most of them dry and difficult to follow. Eventually, she realized that she was spending more time dreading her practice sessions than actually improving. That's when she decided to change her approach. Instead of forcing herself to listen to difficult or boring content, she started exploring podcasts and YouTube channels about topics she loved, travel stories, food culture, and even comedy interviews. That change made a huge difference. Suddenly, listening became something she looked forward to. She would spend her lunch breaks or commute tuning into these channels, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Over time, her listening skills improved naturally. The words started making more sense. She could follow conversations faster and with less effort. Rachel's story shows us that the emotional connection to what we listen to is a real game changer. The truth is, your brain is wired to pay attention when you're interested. This is true for every type of learning, not just language. So choosing voices and topics you genuinely enjoy is not a luxury. It's a strategy. It makes your listening practice more effective because you're more engaged. You'll find yourself rewinding less, feeling less frustrated, and staying focused longer. You're training your brain to listen in a way that feels good, and that leads to faster progress. When I say voices you enjoy, I don't mean you need to find a perfect accent or a fancy speaker. Sometimes the best voices are those that feel friendly, authentic, and relatable. It could be a YouTuber who shares their daily life in simple English, a storyteller with a warm voice, or a podcast host who makes you smile. The important thing is that their voice draws you in. When you enjoy the speaker's tone, energy, and style, your brain is more motivated to keep listening, even when the speech is fast. I encourage you to explore and experiment with different kinds of content. Don't stick to one source just because it's popular or recommended. Try comedy podcasts if you like to laugh. Watch travel vlogs if you love learning about new places. Listen to interviews with people who share your hobbies or career interests. When you find something that excites you, keep it in your rotation and make it a habit. Joy is the fuel for consistent practice. When listening feels fun and rewarding, you'll come back to it every day without feeling forced. And daily exposure is what trains your brain to understand fast English. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But muscles only grow when the workout feels good enough to keep going. One tip I always share is to create a playlist of your favorite English content. Include a variety of voices and topics so you never get bored. Switch things up depending on your mood. Sometimes you might want something light and funny, other times something deep and inspiring. The key is that every time you press play, you feel a little spark of joy that makes you want to listen more. Also, don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. When you listen to voices you like, your brain will naturally start to fill in the gaps over time. You'll become more comfortable with the sounds and rhythms of English without even realizing it. This natural, joyful. Exposure is one of the most effective ways to improve your listening. Remember, the goal is not to torture yourself with difficult or boring content. The goal is to train your brain in a way that feels good, that keeps you coming back, and that builds real skills. When you enjoy what you listen to, you're not just hearing English, you're connecting with it. That connection creates motivation, confidence, and progress. So today, I invite you to take a moment to think about what kinds of voices and topics light you up. Then go out and find English content that matches those interests. Let your curiosity guide you. Make listening a source of pleasure, not pressure. When you do that, your brain will thank you, and your listening skills will improve faster than you expect. One of the most important messages I want to share with you today is about mistakes. When you're learning to understand fast English, mistakes are not only inevitable, they're essential. So many learners feel ashamed or frustrated when they don't catch everything right away. They might think, why can't I understand this? Am I not smart enough? Will I ever get better? I want you to know that these feelings are completely normal, but they do not tell the whole story. In fact, struggling to understand means your brain is working hard, growing, and adapting. It's a sign that progress is happening, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment. Listening to fast English is like going to the gym for your mind. When you lift weights or run, you feel tired and maybe sore afterward, but you also know that your muscles are getting stronger. The same is true for your brain when you listen to challenging English. Each time you try to understand something difficult, your brain forms new connections. It pushes itself to process sounds, rhythms, and meanings faster than before. This mental workout is uncomfortable at times, but it's necessary for real improvement. I want to share the story of David, an IT consultant from Amsterdam. David was a hard worker and very motivated to improve his English listening, but he often felt discouraged when he couldn't understand movies or podcasts on the first try. He said, "I feel like I'm failing because I have to rewind or pause a lot. It makes me feel stupid." When I talked with David, I explained to him that his brain was actually doing exactly what it needed to do. Struggling, yes, but learning too. I told him to think of his listening practice not as a test where he must get everything right immediately, but as a training session where effort and mistakes are part of the process. David started to change how he thought about mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures, he began to see them as opportunities to learn. When he didn't understand a sentence, he didn't get upset anymore. He told himself, "This is hard, but it's helping my brain grow." This simple mindset shift made a huge difference. It lowered his anxiety and made listening practice more enjoyable. He found himself willing to try more challenging materials because he wasn't afraid of getting it wrong. Mistakes in listening are proof that you are pushing your brain beyond its comfort zone, and that's where real growth happens. Your brain learns by making errors and then correcting itself over time. When you encounter a word or phrase you don't recognize, your brain works harder to fill in the gaps based on context. This mental stretching strengthens your listening ability bit by bit. I encourage you to welcome mistakes as part of your journey. Don't be afraid when you miss something. Instead, notice that your brain is actively engaged. Every time you try to listen to fast English, even if you don't understand everything, you are building a stronger, more flexible mind. You're developing the skill to process English naturally and quickly. It's also helpful to remember that no one understands everything perfectly all the time, not even native speakers. In eyes, real conversations, people often ask for repetition or clarification. They guess meanings, they fill in blanks, and they keep going. Learning English listening is the same. It's a skill you develop through practice, patience, and persistence. One way to embrace mistakes is to create a safe, low-pressure listening environment. Listen to materials you enjoy, where it's okay not to catch every word. Use tools like subtitles or transcripts to check what you missed afterward. When you make a mistake, take a moment to learn from it without judgment. This positive approach reduces stress and helps your brain absorb more information. I also remind my learners that progress doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process with ups and downs. Some days you will understand more, some days less. That's completely normal. The important thing is to keep going, to keep practicing even when it's difficult. Every listening session, even one filled with mistakes, brings you closer to your goal. So, next time you find yourself struggling to understand fast English, remember this. Your brain is working hard. It's like a muscle that gets stronger with every effort, every mistake, every moment you listen. Don't let mistakes discourage you. Instead, let them encourage you, because they mean you're learning, growing, and becoming a better listener every day. This mindset shift, from fear of mistakes to acceptance of them, is one of the most powerful tools you can use in your English learning journey. When you see listening as a gym for your mind, not a test to pass perfectly, you'll find more joy and motivation to keep practicing. And that's how real progress happens. One of the most powerful things you can do to improve your English listening skills is to build a daily habit. And the great news is that it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Just 15 minutes a day can make a huge difference. I often hear from learners who feel overwhelmed by the idea of practicing listening because they think they need to spend hours every day. But that's not true. Consistency is much more important than perfection or duration. Practicing a little every day creates momentum, helps your brain adjust, and builds confidence over time. When you practice listening regularly, your brain starts to recognize sounds, patterns, and phrases faster and more naturally. It's like watering a plant. Small amounts of care each day lead to healthy growth. The key is to find 15 minutes that fit easily into your daily routine so it becomes something you look forward to instead of a chore you have to do. Let me give you a few practical tips to help you create this habit. First, try to link your listening practice to something you already do every day. For example, you could listen while having breakfast, during your commute, or even while doing chores around the house. This connection makes it easier to remember and reduces the chance that you'll skip your practice. If you're already brushing your teeth or making coffee every morning, adding listening practice at the same time can make it a seamless part of your routine. Another tip is to choose content that you enjoy and that matches your level. When you like what you're listening to, you're more motivated to keep going. It could be a podcast episode, a YouTube video, an audiobook, or even a song. The important thing is that it feels interesting, so those 15 minutes don't feel like work. Remember, quality beats quantity. 15 focused minutes with good material will help your brain more than an hour of distracted or boring listening. It's also helpful to set a specific time for your practice. When you have a schedule, your brain prepares for it and it becomes a habit faster. For example, you might decide every day at 7 a.m. to listen while you eat breakfast, or at 6 p.m. when you're cooking dinner. Some learners like to set a reminder on their phone or put a note on the fridge to keep themselves accountable. The key is to be consistent and patient with yourself. When you practice, don't worry about understanding every single word or phrase. The goal is to expose your brain to natural English sounds and rhythms regularly. If you feel stuck, try listening to the same material more than once. Repetition builds familiarity and confidence. You might not understand everything the first time, but after a few listens, you'll catch more and more. This is normal and part of the learning process. I remember talking to Marina, a university student from Madrid, who struggled with finding time to practice English listening. She felt busy and stressed, so she thought she couldn't fit it in her schedule. But then she started listening to a short podcast episode every morning while making her coffee. It only took about 15 minutes, but because she made it a daily habit, her listening improved steadily. She said, "I didn't notice the progress at first, but after a few weeks, I could understand much more during my classes and conversations." Marina's story shows how small, consistent steps lead to real change. You don't need perfect conditions or a quiet room to practice. Listening while walking, cooking, or even exercising works well. Your brain will soak up English sounds everywhere, and over time it gets easier to understand even when people speak fast. This is why making listening a regular part of your daily life is so powerful. If you want to take it a step further, you can mix different types of content to keep your practice interesting. One day, you might listen to an interview. The next day, a story or a song. Variety keeps your brain engaged and exposes you to different accents, vocabulary, and topics. It also helps prevent boredom, which can make it harder to stick to your habit. Another idea is to keep a simple journal or note where you write down interesting words or phrases you hear during your daily practice. This reinforces your learning and makes listening more active. You can review your notes anytime and notice your progress over weeks and months. Celebrating small wins like understanding a tricky phrase or catching a fast sentence can keep your motivation high. Remember, the goal is progress, not perfection. Some days you might only manage 10 minutes or feel distracted, and that's okay. The important thing is to come back the next day and keep going. Over time, those 15 minutes add up and your brain becomes more comfortable with the sounds of English. You'll find that fast conversations start to feel less overwhelming and more natural. So today, I invite you to think about your daily routine and find that perfect 15-minute window for your English listening practice. Choose something you enjoy, make it consistent, and be kind to yourself along the way. This simple habit can transform your listening skills and bring you closer to understanding fast English with confidence. As we come to the end of today's episode, I want to leave you with a gentle invitation, a small but powerful challenge. I encourage you to choose just one of the techniques we talked about today and try it within the next 24 hours. Maybe it's shadowing a short clip, practicing prediction by pausing a video and guessing what comes next, or building that simple 15-minute listening habit. Whatever feels right for you, just pick one and give it a try. The key here is not to do everything at once or aim for perfection, but to take one step forward, one small action that moves you closer to understanding fast English more naturally. Have you ever stopped to wonder what your brain is really capable of? What if your brain is more ready than you think? Often, we underestimate ourselves, thinking we need to understand every word perfectly before we can say we're making progress. But that's not true. Your brain is constantly learning, adapting, and growing, even when you don't notice it. It's already absorbing patterns, rhythms, and meanings every time you listen. You just need to give it a little push and trust the process. I want you to take a moment now to think about your journey so far. Maybe you've been learning English for a few months or even years. Maybe you've faced moments of frustration or doubt. But every small step you've taken, whether listening to a podcast, repeating a phrase, or simply exposing yourself to English, counts. These steps add up. They build pathways in your brain that make understanding easier and faster over time. Celebrate those small victories, no matter how tiny they seem. Maybe today you caught a phrase you didn't understand yesterday. Maybe you felt a little more confident when listening to a fast conversation. These moments are proof of your growth. When you recognize and appreciate them, you build motivation and a positive mindset that fuels your learning even more. I also want to thank you sincerely for being part of the English Talk community. Your dedication to improving your English and your willingness to try new techniques inspires me every day. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. We're all learning together, supporting each other. If you found today's episode helpful, I invite you to share it with a friend who might need encouragement or new ideas for their listening practice. Sharing knowledge is one of the best ways to grow, and you never know who might benefit from just one new tip. Before we finish, take a deep breath and imagine how it will feel when you can understand fast English with ease, when conversations flow naturally and you can follow everything without stress. That future is closer than you think, and every small practice brings you closer to it. So, choose your technique, take that first step, and trust your brain's amazing ability to learn. I'm cheering for you every step of the way, and I can't wait to hear about your progress. Thank you for listening, for practicing, and for being part of this community where we learn and grow together.